Okay, men and healing. Let's get into the details. In order to do that, I want to tell you a story. It's a story that everything else is dependent upon because it's where I started out. And I started out in graduate school in the mid-70s learning how to do therapy. And what they taught me was, of course, you sit and you talk about the past. You make good eye contact. And you help people to emote in the session, right? So I was trying to get a job after I got out of grad school, and I couldn't find one. It took me a year to find a job. And finally, the one place that would have me was a place called the St. Francis Center downtown in D.C., which was a center for death and dying. And I knew a little bit about death and dying, but not a whole lot. But I said, oh, I can do it. No problem. So they signed me up, and to work I went. And it wasn't long before I noticed something important. There were 17 therapists at the center, and 16 were females, and one was a guy. That was me. So, who do you think got most of the male referrals? Moi. They would send them straight to Golden. Golden's a man. He can figure it out because these women therapists all said, oh, these guys, they're not dealing with their feelings. They can't talk about their emotions. They had all kinds of ideas about wanting to see women instead of men. And man, I could understand that completely because the women that I had in therapy at the time, when I first got out of school, were great. I mean, I did just what I was taught to do, and it worked just fine with them. But it wasn't working so well with the guys. You know, when I'd sit with the guys, it seemed like I was making them more tense than they were before they came in. You know, make eye contact. Make eye contact. Now, with women, oftentimes making eye contact means you're connecting, you're intimate, you're there together, right? But what it took me a long time to learn was that doesn't mean that to men. Eye contact means something very different to men. Eye contact means put 'em up, pal. It's confrontation time, right? You know, hockey has a face-off. Boxers face each other. You know, so when men have this eye contact thing going on, it's more of a challenge than it is an intimate meeting, you know? So here I was, doing just what I'd been taught to do in grad school, and I was making people more upset, really. I mean, didn't really upset the men, but it wasn't helping because it wasn't really putting them into a place where they could feel comfortable and have somewhat of a sense of safety. So I floundered for quite a while and was thinking for a while that maybe these women are right. Maybe the men just aren't dealing with things. Maybe there's something wrong with the men. And then I bumped into this studies, anthropological studies on indigenous people and the way they dealt with grief. And that opened my eyes because all of these studies had a common theme. And the theme was these indigenous people, when there was a major loss of some sort, they would give the women a safe place to emote and to gather together and to talk and to be together. And they would give the men something to do. Something to do. Either dig the grave, take care of the body, feed the guests, any of hundreds of different things that these people had for men to do. And it started dawning on me, oh my gosh, you know, maybe this is a way that men heal. And so I started watching men in our culture in a different way and started thinking about not asking them what they were feeling, but asking them what they were doing. Because it was through the doing that I found that the men were starting to connect in with things. So once I started seeing that actions were important to men, I also realized that our culture had basically thrown out all of the actions that men do following a loss. I mean, someone else digs the grave, someone else takes care of the body, someone else makes the casket, someone else does this and that. We've basically subcontracted all of the active things that men could do and that men did in these different cultures, and left men with nothing to do but to stand in a funeral home tapping their foot feeling uncomfortable. And I realized that those men who were standing in that funeral home would much rather be out there digging the grave and doing something in honor of that person. They'd much rather be out there making the casket together. I've tried to get funeral homes to sell plans for caskets so that men can have a project to do together. When my father died, my brother and I made the box to hold his ashes. It was a great experience. It was really powerful. And it took us about a week. During that week, men knew my father would come in and they'd help us with the box. And my brother and I'd be working on it. We'd use my father's tools and his wood. And we'd all kind of talk together about my father, And at the same time, we'd be jagging on each other about, not doing this well. Oh, can't you bevel that edge better? Can't you do this? And here, we got to do this way. No, not that way. It's the way guys do, There was plenty of sawdust on that floor from our work. But the sawdust also was catching the tears, Because as we worked, we told stories. And it was the stories that helped us connect. So, you see, it was the work together. It was that action of building this box together that made it easy for us to talk. If you'd taken that same group of men and put them into the living room and had chairs in a circle and said, okay, talk about what's happening, we wouldn't have been nearly as comfortable. But we were comfortable in that workshop. We were comfortable with saws and sandpaper. And it made us feel comfortable. And when we were comfortable, we started to tell stories. And so that's what I started to understand about men. Once I saw that the men in these indigenous peoples would do things through action. Oh my gosh, I found some beautiful actions they would do. There's one tribe in Africa where the actions they give men, the men gather together and they sing the life of the person who died at the funeral. And by the way, their funeral is like 3 days long. But the men gather together and sing the life of the person. Can you imagine going to a funeral and being a part of a group of people who loved the person who died and to sing that life that the person had? Would the emotions just pour through you? Yes. But did they pour through because you were singing, because you were doing something? Yes. And that's what I found was helpful with these men, was to look for the action, look for where they felt safe. And it was the anthropological research that helped started me to get into that direction where I realized that it was action for men that helped them honor the person who died and also helped them contain and process the emotion within. And we'll stop right there for now. The most important thing I learned in these early days was that it wasn't something wrong with the men, it was something wrong with the therapy. And that really what needed adjusting was my approach to men, not the men needing to do things differently for themselves. But what we'll be talking about next is why it took me so long to figure this out. And there's 4 reasons, basically, why it took me a long time. And those 4 reasons have to do with the invisibility of men's pain. How men keep their pain, their emotional pain, quiet so no one can see them. Not just how, but why. We'll start with there next. And come visit me on Patreon. And I could really use your support there. And let's not forget, the most important piece is men are good.